Hello, and welcome to the Autistic Me podcast. I am Christopher Scott Wyatt, speaking as the Autistic Me. John Ordover is a man of many talents, a creative consultant, a writer, an editor, and a stand-up comic. He's even appeared as an extra in some of my favorite television shows. John also advocates for the autistic community as the father of an autistic young adult and the partner of an autistic wife. I first met John virtually while he was finishing his book, Lie There and Lose Weight: How I Lost 100 Pounds by Doing Next to Nothing. I came to know John as the proud parent who celebrates his son's accomplishments instead of mourning his son's autism. As an autistic parent, I appreciate the positive attitude John brings to our community. John also happens to be the co-creator of the book series Star Trek: New Frontier. My wife and I enjoy Star Trek, so I hope to slip in a bit of Trek talk during this episode. It is my honor to welcome John Ordover to the Autistic Me podcast.
Hi, I'm John Ordover, and I can pronounce my name right.
And I could not. I tried multiple takes and could not say it properly.
I'll tell you this much, an Ordover by any other name will still stink. It's all the same.
The reason I asked you to join us on the podcast, other than the fact that you are a multi-talented individual, we talk about life with autism and autistics, and you have an autistic son, and you are married to an autistic woman.
You are correct, sir.
So you have two autistics in your life.
I do.
Twice the fun.
At least, let me say, at least.
At least. I think it's fascinating because you have such a great and positive attitude. And I think right now, after the last year we've had, it's time to look at some things that are positive about being autistic and the autistics in our lives.
I dearly love my wife and son. Well, don't let this word of this get out, but I'm not perfect. I don't expect other people to be perfect. You know, they say no two autistics are alike. Well, my son and my wife are very different people. And they're both just very lovely to have around. Their limitations are more obvious than other people's, but all in all, I'd rather hang out with my son than with a guy who's supposedly neurotypical, but a real schmuck.
If we could talk a little bit about the experiences with your son. Your son, Aaron, is 18?
He is, and you said that name perfectly.
He obviously was a child, as you pointed out to me in our pre-interview discussion.
As so many of us were.
Yeah. And now he's a young adult. That scares a lot of us with children. And I'm sure it scared my parents. How will an autistic do as a young adult? You seem to be managing this with a lot of joy and a lot of pleasure. So can you tell us about that transition to late teen, early adulthood?
In many ways, the trick is just to separate which behaviors are typical teenage behaviors and which behaviors are autistic behaviors. When I knock at his door and step in his room and he looks at me and goes, "No parents." Well, that's not autism. He's 18. He didn't ask me to come in there. He's listening to his rock music at a high volume. I just have to say, okay, no parents, and I back out. I am, as everyone will tell you, perhaps the least active person on earth. And he is perhaps the most active person on earth. So a lot of it is just making sure he's got room to rollerblade. We're coming up on the ocean. He surfs, which I would never even try to do. But basically, as a parent yourself, as any parent knows, there's nothing that really is so heartwarming as watching your kid enjoy themselves. And Aaron spends a lot of his time enjoying himself.
Do you think that is a lack of inhibition, a lack of awareness, or just even not focusing on what others think and he can just be himself?
Fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, what Aaron is really into is something that is socially valued. You ride a big wave in, you gallop by on a horse, you jump hurdles on rollerblades. That earns you street cred, whether you're autistic or not. And while he's doing it, nobody can tell. So it's not that he doesn't care. A lot of it is just that I think he finds a lot of other people boring. So if you interest him, then he'll interact with you. But if you're being boring, he won't he doesn't have the language to disengage politely, he'll basically go and then walk off and do something else. And that he doesn't care about.
You are busy. I know you said you're not very active. In fact, I think now's a good time to even mention that you wrote a book about losing weight without a whole lot of effort.
Yeah. Well, no. By not moving very much. The bottom line is the equating of exercise and losing weight is false. To lose weight, you have to cut calories and you have to keep them cut, and that's the bottom line. But exercise doesn't burn very many calories. I mean, you run a mile, that's 100 calories. That's a quarter of a muffin. If you cut calories and start exercising at the same time, you're just going to drive yourself nuts. It's not sustainable to suddenly do both at the same time. Pick one. And pick the one that works if you want to lose weight, if that's your goal. The book I just happened to bring up is called Lie There and Lose Weight, How I Lost 100 Pounds by Doing Next to Nothing by John J. Ordover. Just by coincidence, I am the author.
The reason I mention that is you say you don't do a lot, but you do an awful lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
You are a writer. You're an editor. You're a creative consultant. You have played a role in what I would consider popular culture national treasures. And so your son is active in a different way.
Yes. He moves his whole body. I move my fingers.
Does he appreciate the stand-up and the writing? Does he understand what he gives you in those realms?
It's impossible for us to tell, really. I did have him brought to one of my stand-up shows. He sings. He's the singer in a band of autistic kids. And so he saw one person after another getting up there and talking into the microphone, but never bursting into song or never playing an instrument. He was just, what the hell is this? But then I got up there and he turned to the aide and he went, Dad! And then I did very well that night. Lots and lots of laughs. And when I was finished and said goodbye, he stood up and went. So that much I know he approved of it.
That's cool.
Yeah, so that was fun.
How do you look at everything so positively? You love how he's active. You seem to really enjoy what he brings to your life. And yet so often what we see online and in books is how to cope with your autistic child, how to deal with the burden of autism. And quite honestly, as an autistic and a parent, I find that insulting.
Well, I do find it irritating. I do find it also a good opportunity, though. Someone says, oh, wow, if you ever need any help dealing with your autistic son, just let me know. I said, sure. Can you write a check for $100 to his school? It's reach for the stars. I mean, it's like, sure, if they want to pity us, if they want to, they want to, oh, it must be so hard. Fine, I'll take advantage of that to get something out of them. But it's not that it isn't harder than other parents, but I think parenting every child is difficult in its own way. And Aaron is difficult in some ways. He's not difficult in other ways. We're fairly certain he's not going to get drunk and smash up the car, for one thing. No one at school is going to talk him into doing drugs. He also has a killer sense of humor. Doesn't come out very easily because he doesn't speak much, but like a teacher, over Zoom, a teacher was doing an exercise with him, which was having him put his foot in a bowl of water and then talk about the emotion. And so she said, so Aaron, how does it feel having your foot in the water? And he went, wet.
True.
And she said, okay, yes, but how else does it make you feel? Cold. And it's like, okay, Aaron, but talking about emotions, in terms of emotions, how does it make you feel? Stupid. And I have seen him actively drive the teacher nuts. Like, there was this one incident with a teacher where they were doing some sort of testing exercise, and it couldn't, the testing for his capabilities. And they couldn't move on to the next thing until they finished the thing they were doing, which just happened to be taking cards labeled 1 to 10 and laying them out in the order of 1 to 10. So Arn took the cards and he went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then he would slide 9 over and put 10 between 8 and 9. And the teacher would say, no, do it again. Arn, you know how to do this. Just do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 9. And the teacher just was really losing it. And Arn was having a blast. And it's like, I just happened to be there. And I said, you do realize that Arn has gotten you under control now, right? And I guess that's part of it. Arn has his serious issues, but he's very smart. And he's not going to let you screw with him. And that's always a joy to behold. They got a new school psychiatrist, and every time Arn acted out in one of a set of ways, she had left word that she had to be called in immediately to deal with it. And he picked up very quickly that if he did any of those things, she would run into the room. So he had her under control. All he had to do was, and in she'd run. And then as soon as she left, he would imitate her. He would do exactly what she had just done. So he was, and I had warned her at the start of the year, if you do not watch Arn carefully, he will get you under control. You think you're the behaviorist. He is going, and it's just so, there's so many moments of glee when you see that he's just, I don't know, he's a very positive person. If I was miserable, it wouldn't help. We are, thank God, in the position where we'll be able to, I'm looking ahead to starting a group home for him, so there'll be someplace for him to hang out with other kids and do stuff. So
what you describe, though, is someone who understands power structures and tweaking them somewhat for the pleasure of it.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes. Arn, Mom, Dad, go upstairs. Arn, do you want us to go upstairs because you want to do something bad? Yes. Arn, is that a good thing you're going to do or a bad thing? A bad thing. Well, do you want to be a good boy or a bad boy? A bad boy. He's always very honest.
The honesty always ends up tripping them up. I noticed that yesterday, our oldest, the one we call Lee on the podcast, she hadn't done a report. And so I brought up the screen time analysis that the computer does for you. And I pointed out to her, there was an hour and a half where you were playing a game and you said you were late on your homework. And she's like, yeah. No. I was doing, it was just like, yeah. So she's not good at this. She's not being deceptive once caught. She'll just say, oh yeah, I was. But she clearly had that intent to not do the homework.
Yes.
To do what she wanted to do.
Yes. I've also known Arn is very much an experimentalist. He wants to see what will happen if he does X. So it's like, Arn, don't go out there. Why? Well, you're just not supposed to. So he goes. What? What was supposed to happen? Comes back inside. We've had to learn to react to things by being blasé about them rather than getting upset or angry.
How long does that take before you don't panic?
I don't know. He's only 18. I don't know yet. But look, here's one of the things that happened that made us not panic. Arn had what they call vertical instability or something like that. Anyway, it meant he was scared of heights. Fancy word for afraid of heights. When he was 3 and first started there. So they slowly worked him up one step on a ladder, up 2 steps on a ladder, until by the time he was 4, he was walking a balance beam back and forth. Okay, they just worked with him every single day. Then we go to the playground. He climbs up to the top of the monkey bars and walks back and forth across the top of the monkey bars. And all the other parents are freaking out. And we're going, well, why? What? Oh, I see. Aaron, could you come down now? Okay.
So he was doing a tightrope act right there in front of everybody.
Yes, and we realized how blasé we'd gotten because Arn has had the necessary interventions so that he can do the things he do. He's also very, very good at knowing exactly what he can do. And example, one of those things you never think you'd have to say to your kid. We're waiting for a light to change on the street walking, and he climbed up the lamppost right next to it. And he's up there almost at the top and he said, Aaron, I'm very impressed that you can climb the whole lamppost. But could you climb down now? We have to cross the street. And he goes, okay, climbs right back down.
And you just go with everything.
He got at a school thing. He climbed a tall tree and then sat out on a limb. And the grandmothers were all freaking out. And the parents were all freaking out at this school thing. And they said, why are you just letting him do that? What are you? And I said, okay, I'll have to demonstrate this again. Aaron, could you come down, please? Climb. I said, you do remember he takes trapeze, right? You do remember he surfs, right? You do remember that there's really nothing. Basically, you learn your child's limits, and then once you've learned them, you let them explore them.
He sounds like his sensory seeking has led to some of his athleticism.
Absolutely. He loves the feel of doing things. He loves the feel of exploring. He's an explorer. He has been since very young, in the sense that, I'm in a place I've never been. If we took him to somebody else's house, the first thing he would do is go in every room of their house because he wants to explore it. And then he'll come right back. Now, I of course, as with any parent, I tend to paint a very positive picture of Aaron. Left alone to his own devices with glass or ceramic, Aaron will smash it on the floor. Why, we don't know. We think that's more Tourette's than autism. But he'll also grab a broom and a dustpan and clean it right up. Or if he makes a mess, he'll enjoy, it's hard to get him to stop because he enjoys cleaning it up just as much as he enjoys doing it. So we've basically done our best to Aaron-proof his world. And that helps a lot.
You said he has a Tourette's diagnosis as well?
Yes.
So in addition to the autistic traits, he has Tourette's. Are there other challenges that he faces?
A certain amount of OCD, but how you pry that apart from autism is very hard to figure out. But just that, Tourette's. Other than that, he's very bright. People will say to me, well, if he can't talk, how do you know he's not stupid? And I'll say, get between him and something he wants and watch what happens.
I think that we frequently underestimate the nonverbal or limited verbal autistics who have amazing abilities and internal capabilities. We just ignore them. And
right.
that is troubling. One of our daughters was very late to be verbal. And so when she started speaking, the caseworkers were all, oh, aren't you so glad she can speak? It was as if just speaking changed who she was. When we saw the same kid, she just now had words to go along with the energetic, bouncy personality.
Right.
But I think we put so much value on that verbal communication that it becomes the highlight of autism.
Yes, when Aaron was like 3 or 4, he had a neurotypical friend over, and the neurotypical friend was saying, I want a cup, I want a cup, I want a cup. And Aaron looked at him strangely, went, got a stepladder, walked up the stepladder to the counter, opened the cabinet, got a cup, and gave it to him. If you want to, Aaron doesn't understand asking for something very well.
Oh, yes.
It's far easier for him to go get it.
Yep.
Than it is to ask for something. So he'll take the easy route out, and it's like, I want something that's out of my reach. I'll figure out a way to reach it. I want something I could go over and ask and get it in a second, or I could spend 15 minutes building a contraption that lets me go get it. I'd rather build a contraption if that's actually easier. So that's once you understand that they're capable of doing things, just not capable of doing it the way you would think the way a neurotypical kid would do. That's all I can say. It's just like, how do I keep my mood up? Well, it's not that it's not a burden. It is. It's not that it's not difficult. It is. As I'm sure you know, it's a huge challenge. But your personal mood is under your control. And it's not going to help your kid if you're depressed and stressed out all the time.
You and your wife were evaluated after your son was diagnosed. And that seems to be a fairly common occurrence now, where parents who have struggled with social skills or workplaces have an autistic child, and then they become aware that, oh, yeah, I've had these traits. So we talked a little bit about that. You don't always seem to care what people think.
My assessor said, John, you're perfectly aware of social cues. You just don't give a damn. And that's an issue, but it's not an autism issue. And that's basically right.
That. Yeah, people forget that there is a difference. So you can do things that I have struggled with, like in a conversation, you can read the pitch and the facial expressions.
Yes.
And you aren't face blind or voice blind or anything like that.
No.
You simply have had to learn what is being communicated around you naturally. It just happens. You just pick it up, and that's
right.
What makes you a good performer.
Right.
So how do you see the difference for Aaron? How does that, do you interpret the world for him? Do you sometimes clue him in? How does that work?
It's very difficult to say, because he's almost always cheerful and happy. Here's an example. Aaron was about 4. He was in a play place. An 8-year-old pushed him down to try and dominate him. Aaron hit the floor, laughed his head off because he loves to be pushed down, stood up, pushed the 8-year-old down, and sat on him. So Aaron totally misunderstood that this was a dominance game, but didn't care. So to some extent, maybe I think he has some of my, I get it, but I don't care. People have yelled at Aaron on the street. It's New York. It happened. And Aaron just laughs at them. And they get more upset. And Aaron says, oh, if I laugh at them, they'll get more upset. This is fun.
I would say that my wife is sort of the household social cue expert. So she'll tell us, that person was being sarcastic. That was not nice. That person was trying to get you to do something. And what I find is our little one, Anne, is a hugger. That's how she describes herself. She just walks up to things and hugs them. Maybe not always people. She just hugs.
Okay.
And if someone says something mean to her, her response isn't to get mad. Her response is to give them a hug. Because she assumes, well, they just need a hug.
Oh.
And so I kind of like that, where a neurotypical might read the anger and respond to the anger with anger. Her response to anger and loudness is to instantly assume the person needs a hug.
That's lovely.
Yeah, in some ways, I think it's a much better response.
and I bet about at least half the time they do need a hug. Probably
make the world a whole lot better place.
Yes. Sir, the army is coming up. Okay, get out the hugging pillows. Get out the hugging pillows. Do we have enough stuffed rabbits for everybody?
I've known a few professional comics over the years, and most of them off stage were fighting some rather dark personal demons. They had a different way of looking at it. In some ways, I'd argue that they weren't quite neurotypical. They were actually very sensitive people, very insightful people who saw all of the pain in the world and turned it into humor. What role has your parenthood and your life with Aaron affected your leap into stand-up?
Oh, I've gotten some occasional material out of him because the one-word answer thing can be worked into a lot of jokes. But I like to think of myself as insightful. I've always done humor stuff, one way or another. This whole laughter comes out of misery or out of pain thing. I don't really buy it. Laughter comes out of being funny. I mean, for me, making other people laugh was a defense mechanism against my parents. One of my comedy teachers said, "Who was funny, your mother or your father?" I'm going, neither one of them. Yeah, that was my job. Being funny was my job. But you sort of could, you could get control of the situation if you could make them laugh. But it's not. Certainly, a lot of my laugh lines come out of irritation, or something that annoys me or confounds me. Off the cuff, a B- joke at best. It's like, I got a call on my cell phone. It said unavailable. I had to think. If they were unavailable, what did they call? It's that kind of, for me at least, it's that kind of mind twisting. It's like an old Thurber cartoon where a woman is on the phone and saying, "Well, if I dialed the wrong number, why did you answer the phone?" It's the same joke, just changed a bit. I've always studied humor. I've always read about humor, and I've written a lot of prose humor. And this was just a matter of shifting.
The stand-up actually came out of doing background work for television.
Yeah, which I did because I wanted to learn a little bit about it, and basically just as a lark. They pay minimum wage for it. It's not anything to write home about. And from Miss Maisel did a pop-up duplication of the Carnegie Deli, which has been closed in New York for about 10 years. Yeah. They did a pop-up version of it, and they were looking for 3 people to play the owners of the Carnegie Deli in 1958. And I was still on the audition list, so they sent me the audition. I said, 1958, Carnegie Deli? I spent half my life at the Carnegie Deli. Okay, so I sat down, I did an audition, sent it in within 30 seconds of the audition post, got the audition, had to go through 3 more auditions, and I got the role. So it was just being live and improvising in character for 11 straight days as an old Jewish guy who was one of the owners of the Carnegie Deli.
Wow.
And I was like, wow. And afterwards, I got to meet the people who actually owned the Carnegie Deli. It was great. And they said, what else what else you're so good. What else will we have seen you in? I said, this is the first time I did anything. I said, but you're so good. So it's kind of their fault. Wow. I blame it on the Carnegie Deli. That's the title of my autobiography.
Does Aaron know that what you do? You said he has been to one of your shows.
Right.
Does he know that you've been doing the acting?
I don't know. I stopped doing that. Once I felt I'd learned everything I could as an extra, I decided I'm going to use New York City as a comedy university. So I took improv at the UCB. I took sketch writing at UCB, Upright Citizens Brigade.
Wow.
And it said, what else have I done? Oh, I haven't done stand-up yet. So I took a stand-up class with a teacher I didn't really get along with. But then I went and took the class. I found out an old friend of mine who I hadn't seen much over like the last 30 years was teaching stand-up. And I knew had been a stand-up for 40 years. So I started taking his class and we clicked. And I learned and learned and learned and learned. And I decided, of all these things, I can go to 1,000 auditions and I won't know if I can perform. But I can do an open mic tonight. So I can practice and practice and practice. And it's practical. But does Aaron know what I do? I'm not sure. It's impossible to tell. If you ask, what does Daddy do? He would probably say, sit downstairs and type. I mean, what do your kids think you do?
Sit at a computer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. One of them said, Daddy's a teacher, but there's no kids.
Like that. Daddy sits in the basement and pretends he's a teacher.
Yeah, that's really. This has been, yeah, it's hard to explain to them. I took them to the campus when I was teaching at the university, and I took them to campus, and obviously they were doted upon and given lots of attention, and
Right.
we ate in the student union. And it still doesn't dawn on them because what I do isn't K-12. It's not, it's not kindergarten or first grade. And so they don't get it. They do think it's interesting, but often they'll say,
Hey, that's okay. That's okay. I went to college and I never got any.
I like how they'll say,
I pay you money to judge me.
Yeah.
I assure you, I have people out the door who will judge me for free.
Absolutely. You're right. And I love it when we go somewhere and they're asked, well, what do mommy and daddy do? And they'll say, well, mommy's an engineering technical writer. And that's it. And it's like, oh, what does daddy do? Stuff.
Yeah.
So mommy gets the long explanation. They even, with the homeschooling, they have been saying, well, mommy's like the principal. And daddy's the substitute teacher. But apparently I'm the sub for the whole year. So when we talk about family, and obviously our families are important to both of us.
Right.
And I am blessed to have a wife who tolerates 3 neurodiverse people in the house. And I know it's not easy for her because, we will say something and it's so literal. I told our oldest, drop everything and come here, please. And then I hear a crash from the other room.
Yes.
And I was like, what did you do? Dropping stuff. Okay. I should have known. My wife will constantly remind me, you cannot use idioms. She hasn't learned them yet. You forget that you had to learn them. Well, she has to learn them. In some ways, you are in that role as the neurotypical person in the neurodiverse universe.
Yes. With my circumstance, like with my wife, it would be, we have to leave at 3:15. We have to leave for our trip at 3:15. She'll be out and she's not coming back and she's not coming back. And she'll be back. And like at 3:10, she comes back and says, well, I'm here. And I said, but we have all this stuff to do. She said, you're leaving. You said we were leaving at 3:15. I'm back before 3:15. What's the problem? It's like, we have 2 hours of packing to do.
She assumed you were going to do it. There you go.
Yeah. Well, no, she just.
Time does not work for some of us.
Yes, and we've had to have a discussion in which we basically said, if there is some place we both have to be, if you have to be in the house by 3:15, I need you to not leave after 1:15. As long as it's a very specific rule.
It's difficult to navigate when you have all of these different ways of perceiving time and what is or isn't important. It's very easy for my wife to feel, I guess, overwhelmed because she wants things to make sense to her. And so a lot of assumptions are made. And she'll have to ask, well, why didn't you? Well, you didn't tell me to do that. You just said, get ready.
I don't believe in the concept really, but I assume you've read about Jung's collective unconscious idea.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think as a metaphor, you could say that neurotypicals are tied into that subconscious, collective unconscious, and autistics are not. So it's like we're all part of this telepathic continuum that autistics stand on the outside of. I can say to my wife, could you bring me that drink I like? And she'll say, you're going to have to be more specific.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say, okay, could you bring me the strawberry soda? We have 2 kinds of strawberry soda. Which kind do you want? I'd like the extra sparkly strawberry soda. Fine. Do you want the one from the refrigerator, or do you want the one from next to the stove where we keep? Right. And it's sort of like, this would have been all so much easier if I could just learn to say, I'd like the extra sparkly strawberry soda from the fridge, please. And it's like, that's really not too much to ask of me.
It feels
Um,
like things get left out, and I'm trying to decode things, whether it's from a student or my wife or a coworker. It always feels like they said something, but I wasn't given the secret decoder ring.
yes,
But they all understood each other.
yes,
Like an easy example, if a faculty meeting was during lunch, everyone would know to bring a bag lunch.
right.
And I'm sitting there thinking, how did everyone know to bring food? And it was just obvious to them. A lunch meeting meant bring a lunch with you.
See,
And
my response to that would be, after a while, I would notice that Wyatt never brings a lunch, so I'll bring 2 lunches. Don't worry, Wyatt, I got you covered. And that's how I work with my wife. It's like I know certain things will or will not get done in certain ways, and I compensate. And there are things no one else in the world would put up with about me that I'm sure she could spend the next hour, 2 or 3 hours listening for you. So it works.
You are performing in May?
Oh, yes. As long as I'm here, why don't I mention that I'll be at the Broadway Comedy Club on May 8th, the 9 o'clock show. If you buy your tickets online with the code Ordover, ORDO, as in Victor, ER, you will get $10 off. And I'll get credit for having invited you. So it works both ways.
Are they doing live performances now with?
They are as of April 2nd.
Wow.
I will be fully immunized by April 16th. So after that, I'm going to be doing live stuff again.
You said that Aaron has been vaccinated. He's received his first shot?
Yes. In New York, developmental disability is a comorbidity.
Wow.
Because there was a lot of complaints that the kids in group homes were getting vaccines and the kids who weren't in group homes weren't, but they were still going to school.
Does that mean that he will be able to go back to school then after the vaccine, or
after he's fully vaccinated, he will go back to school?
And do you think he's looking forward to that?
We haven't told him because there's too much that could happen between now and then to make it not happen. The city could change the rules. There could be a fifth wave. There could be a variant. So we tend not to tell him things until we're absolutely certain they're definitely going to happen. Like the camp he goes to in the summer for 2 weeks. This year they say they're open. And we've signed him up and we've done all the things to do that, but it's not till June 28th. Things can happen. So we're going to wait to tell him until at least we're absolutely certain he's going to actually get to go. Because he loves it. Other kids, no parents, yay! You want to say goodbye to mom and dad before you're already running off to someone.
So he looks forward to certain things, and the disappointment would register.
Oh, definitely, absolutely. He would be very sad. Last year, we quickly rented a house on Fire Island for a week because we couldn't do camp, and we put together we hired a couple of kids to come with us to Fire Island to play with Aaron. By kids, I mean 22, 21. You know how we stay the same age and they get younger?
Yes.
Yeah. So we basically had to make it all up ourselves. This year, fingers crossed, Aaron will go to camp, which he'd prefer. We're going to take the darn house for ourselves.
One of the things that people don't understand is we do school every day of the week because the girls, that routine has become so ingrained in them that it confuses them when the routine is shifted. The school week, they had the hardest time understanding that after Friday, there was going to be 2 days where they didn't see the teacher. And the little one would tell us, I miss my teacher on Saturday or Sunday. The weekends were actually the disruption.
Arnd would prefer not to be doing Zoom.
I like that.
He'd prefer to be rollerblading. He'd prefer to be horseback riding. He'd prefer to be doing any of a dozen other things than Zoom school. And so he doesn't miss it when he doesn't get to do it.
So he's been online for the year.
He's been online since the lockdown came down.
We did the online for the end of last school year, but this school year we opted for paper because we found the digital was too distracting. They just could not, they zone out with a screen. They just, our girls could not focus and do the work, and it just wasn't engaging for them.
Well, what we found is we had to give Arn a separate computer from his iPad to do his work, to do schoolwork on, because we couldn't expect him to hold the thing he uses to play and focus on school. But once we said, okay, this computer is your school computer, you use this for school, then this is for games, this is for school, he got it, and he was fine. I think there are some aspects of the Zoom that's helped him. For example, with eye contact. He makes much better eye contact on a computer than he does if the person's right there. But his eye contact has improved since he's gotten this less overstimulating thing from the screen. So he looks at the teacher on the screen right in the eyes, and then he'll be able to look longer at a person in the eyes. Although we long ago said, Arn, you don't have to look at someone's eyes. Look at their nose. They'll think you're looking at your eyes. They'll be happy. So he often looks right at people's noses and they don't notice.
It has been difficult for me as an autistic and a parent. The Self-Advocacy Network has a lot of negativity towards supports. Because as children in the 1970s or 80s or even 90s, they had bad experiences. But I know that for our daughters, it helps to have someone work with them, especially on, I'm going to say it wrong, the spatiomotor. They don't know where their bodies are.
Proprioception.
Thank you. Yes, that
You're welcome.
sixth sense, where they walk into walls and have bruises all over themselves. And so that becomes a safety issue. And of course, I'm going to take them to physical therapy and occupational therapy and these other supports that I think are helping them, that are done in a way that I've watched where they consider it playtime. They really enjoy a good therapist.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are plenty of bad therapists, but I've really had good luck with therapists who cheer them along and help them with their bodies, their movement, their eating.
Well, like I said, Arn, at 3, Arn would burst into tears going up one step on a ladder. By 4 or 5, he was walking across the top of monkey bars. They taught him, and he was able to learn proprioception that's much better than average. But that's because he was taught. And neurotypical people who are, well, you're just a klutz. Well, maybe they're not a klutz. Maybe they just needed some intervention that they didn't get.
And I think that's a positive way to look at it. It's a support that helps. And you don't want it to be a negative support. You want it to be a positive support.
Yeah.
Come on, would you like to try another step today? If not, that's okay. But if you'd like to, I'm here for you.
Right. There's lots of ways. The bottom line, ABA was based off of animal training. At that point, it had to be. It was all they had. But since then, they have gotten much more sophisticated and human about it. And you just need to make sure you find a sophisticated human person. That's why I loved so much when this psychologist, like I told you, when Arn got complete behavioral control over her, it was just wonderful to see. It's like, oh, you think you're sort of like the Zen master of controlling other people's behavior. Well, my son who can't even talk, give him another couple of weeks and he's going to have you dancing a square dance as he claps. Okay? He understands what's going on. There's a human being there, not a chimp. There's a human being there. And the way I put it is, the more you can get an autistic child involved in their own therapy, the better it will work. In the sense that one of the issues with Arn is he does not see the point in telling somebody something they already know. And as a teacher, you could probably, what is your job? Your job is to tell somebody something you know, and then have them essentially tell it back to you. I mean, it's much more sophisticated than that, but that's the basic job. But it's sort of like, you taught me how to do algebra or whatever. You taught me how to do algebra. You know how to do it. Why are you asking me? He doesn't quite get the game show aspect of taking a test.
Mm-hmm.
What you're at, and so they sort of had to they had to make sure the tests and evaluations weren't given to him by the people who had taught him that particular skill, because he thought that was ridiculous. And we also had situations where we reversed it and said, Arn, why don't you, so he was having trouble, why don't you teach her how to do it? Why don't you show the teacher how to do this? And then he went, oh my God, when he was putting together models, unsurprisingly, he's good with puzzles, but he's also very good at following picture direction. We have all IKEA furniture in our house, and he put it all together because he's the only one who could take a picture and turn it into an action. He's at school. We've gotten him these science model kits to put together that once they're done, they actually do something cool.
Mm-hmm.
And one of his teachers was working with him on it. And the teacher does something, and Arn goes, no, Jeff, there's great pleasure to be found in your autistic kid. Yeah, it's a schlep. But just think about it. What if your kid was a jock and you had to take him to 12 different sports teams and go to 12 different games? Is that really any different?
It's not unexpected. We chose to have children. My wife and I chose to have these two wonderful daughters, and
right.
We knew there would be work involved. It's not like it's a surprise. There's Girl Scouts and there's swimming and all of those things that they enjoy in their way.
Yeah. Well, you have to talk to my mother, who when I was born, was stunned I didn't have teeth and couldn't dress myself. I wish that was a joke. I didn't realize you had to take care of it. That they don't feed themselves.
It's funny, but people will get surprised by the fact that our daughters knew when they were 2 and 3 years old to get into the pantry. And we discovered that they were inventive and creative by finding candy wrappers hidden in the cat tree.
Exactly.
They had gotten in, they had helped themselves to candy, they had disposed of the evidence and gone back to bed.
Another thing that people are surprised at, we very early on set the rule that we would not fight with Arn over food. And he still pretty much is made almost entirely of chicken nuggets. But that's fine. I mean, he has 10 things. He has a healthy diet. Once a year, his annual includes a vitamin screening. And so far, he's yet to come up with any problems on that issue. I will say this. It is chicken nuggets and gummy snacks. So
yeah.
Between the two, that's a complete balanced diet as far as I'm concerned.
The concern I have is personal, and that is my family. There's a history of anemia and diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
And even though our children are adopted, we're very aware of potential health background issues. And so there's a history of diabetes in their family. So
right.
You want to teach your children some healthy habits, but what we have found is what they love is what they love.
One of our parents was talking about how important it is to teach the kids good eating habits from ground up. I said, Megan, when your 6-year-old gets to college, do you think he's not going to order pizza because you made him eat broccoli at 6? It's just not how it works.
No.
Because of my diet book now, I'll pull out that cred and say, look, the reality is human beings like sugar and fat. And anything that has sugar and fat stirred together is going to be something that's almost irresistible.
Yes.
Ice cream and pizza are pretty much ice cream, pizza, donuts. It's sugar and fat.
Some autistics and children with sensory processing issues, they're not just being picky. They really don't like the taste, the texture,
I did not understand food aversions until the second week we were married, and my wife managed to give me something that she thought was a treat, but that I turned out to have an aversion to. 2 different types of cereal mixed together.
Oh.
Say, the equivalent of Trix mixed with Raisin Bran. And it's the idea of it even upsets me. So now I understand what a food aversion is, and it is not the same as, well, I just don't happen to like lima beans. It's a whole different level of, it's a completely different thing. I didn't even know I had any.
I really appreciate that you have taken so much time and patience. I want to touch on one thing that's important to me and my wife. So hopefully you can talk about it a little. My wife's family owns a bookstore. She grew up reading the serialized books from Star Trek and many other series as well. And you have been involved in some of those publications and the actual TV series. One of the things about it is the Star Trek universe is considered utopian.
It depends.
The Deep Space Nine faction.
Well, it's not just that. Fortunately, I'm not connected to it anymore, so I can speak honestly. A friend of mine summed it up perfectly. Star Trek eliminated all the troubles between the different races of mankind by making all races into white middle-class Americans, no matter what they look like.
Wow, I had not thought of it that way.
And I thought that was freaking brilliant. I said, you got it. That's exactly what they've done. It's not that the different cultures get along. It's that all cultures except white culture have been wiped out.
I hadn't really thought about it, but you don't see other signs of other cultures among the human crew members.
Not until Cisco had some African stuff in his cabin.
You don't look at it as a utopian view of the future and what humans are capable of?
My problem with Star Trek, I appreciate the effort. I appreciate that they showed us a vision of one way, very much. But where Star Trek drops out for me is they don't tell us how we get there. Suddenly they say, here is a future world where none of these things are problems anymore. How? What happened? How did we change? Is it just that because everyone has access to so much energy and so much holodeck technology, that nobody's ever short of anything? Is that it? I can make a good case that the only thing humans can care about anymore is competing for status.
I may be wrong, but was Pike the only person ever presented as a physically disabled human?
They had aliens like Melora who came from a low gravity planet and so had a lot of trouble functioning in what we consider normal gravity. So they had models of it. Oh, and yes, Is There a Truth, No Beauty? She was blind, but she used technology to be able to see.
What I'm getting at is, in the utopian view of Star Trek, I don't see disabled individuals. I don't see.
Well, let me bring in the X-Men. Bring in the X-Men from Marvel Comics. Professor X has been sitting in a wheelchair since 1963. Okay? He lives in a world of magic, of incredible high technology. And no one has been able to Tony Stark hasn't been able to give him prosthetics. But once you get technology up to a certain level, it becomes very, very difficult to have someone with a believable physical disability. You start to ask yourself, why can't they just fix it? I was involved with creating the story for It's Only a Paper Moon on Deep Space Nine, where Nog has his leg blown off, but then replaced by a biosynthetic. And he's so post-traumatic disordered that he won't come out of the holodeck. It always makes me uncomfortable when a future high-tech show shows someone who was upset because they lost their leg and had to have it replaced by one that's absolutely identical, and they can still walk around easily. I worry about the people who've actually lost the leg in our world and don't have access to that technology. Now, I've gotten nothing but good responses from people who were actually injured from that episode, and thank goodness. But it makes me uncomfortable. There's the Jack Pack on Deep Space Nine, the mentally disabled, the people who went through Bashir's hyperintelligent genetic stuff, but did not come out as good as he did. So they were mentally disabled to some extent. They were not neurotypical to one extent or another. once you introduce Q, it's sort of like, what about the disabled people? Well, being disabled, it's like, what? I have a cousin who's significantly, but not completely deaf. When she was pregnant, she got cochlear implants. There's a huge conflict in the deaf community about whether you should have cochlear implants or you should, or you're destroying they're destroying the deaf community. Her attitude is, I wanted to hear my baby cry, and I don't really give a damn about the politics. The people who want them should have them, and the people who don't want them shouldn't. But we're getting there. We're getting to the point where being deaf is a choice. Not 50 years from now, being blind will be a choice. I realize this is a very muddled answer, which was being asked in the terms of Star Trek, but that's my muddled response, which is, it's hard to believe that we can't just, if we can whip out bionic, perfect biomimetic limbs and slap them on if you lose one, being disabled is a choice.
As the parent of two wonderful daughters who are neurodiverse, I worry that the idea that everyone will become the same in the future, I wonder what we would lose if we tried to make everyone the same. What's interesting to me is the neurodiversity community will say, oh, well, look at Spock. He's autistic. It's like, no, Spock is not autistic. No, that's a religion almost. That's different. That's not.
But I don't know whether you saw the episode where we got Bashir's backstory. They eventually revealed him to be genetically enhanced like Khan was, because his parents, when his parents had him, he was mentally disabled. So they pulled strings to get the treatment for him so that it would make him superior. And he's always resented them for it, because to him, it felt like he wasn't good enough for them the way he was. So they had to make him amazing, or they wouldn't love it. What they're saying is, we were afraid if we didn't help you, you would have a miserable life. It's a question. If Arn were born with one leg, would I get him a prosthetic? Of course. It is possible to remove the incapacities. Once we get to this point, we remove the incapacities without removing the distinction. But it's a really tricky question. People ask me, if you had known beforehand, we had known in utero that Arn would be autistic when he was born, would you have aborted? And my personal answer is, who knows? Thank God I wasn't faced with that decision.
We know that parents have to make those decisions because of the genetic testing that's done now. Down syndrome, Tay-Sachs, plenty of,
Well, Tay-Sachs, at least you can test for before you're even impregnated. You can see if the parents ever carriers.
I'm trying to think. Is it Huntington's that they can also do that with?
Right.
Yeah. It's an interesting question, and the reason I was curious is you were so involved with science fiction, the books, that world. I remember watching Deep Space Nine and those shows. Gosh, that was what, 1980s and 90s.
It was the 19.
Yeah, right. But it's interesting. The future is always so perfect, and so if you're disabled, you wonder, will people like me exist in this future?
It's an interesting question. Presumably, when you reached a certain age, you could decide for yourself whether you wanted to continue to be disabled.
Oh, I like that. A chance at free will to decide who you'll be.
Yeah, well, that would be nice. I know autistics who say, if I could stop being autistic, I would in a second. And I know ones who said, any attempt to change me is an affront against my nature. So the only solution I can offer to that is free will.
It's such a difficult subject in the autistic community, because when they say, like autism is my superpower or autism is a gift, there's that part of me that says, yes, I'm very good at focus. I'm very good at numbers and not good at social skills. And that's great for certain types of work. But at the same time, a storm can throw me completely off for days on end because thunder and lightning. And so when they say, well, the world wasn't created for you, I'm like, really? Because mankind had nothing to do with thunder and lightning, and it can render me pretty useless. Wind, I hate.
Have
wind.
you tried one of those thunderstorm shirts they have for dogs?
No. Oh, but like a weighted blanket?
Yeah.
It would probably help. I mummy myself at night, trying to block all the light out, trying to block. So there are aspects of autism that I do find that are debilitating. It's considered a disability because parts of my life will never be independent or fully I don't know how else to describe it. When they say that you won't be independent, I always go back to, well, but nobody is. So that's kind of a misleading.
Arn will never be able to get a job and support himself.
Okay, that's what
my
it comes down
definition.
to.
That's my definition of independent.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to. I will probably never have a career.
I thought you taught college.
Adjunct. I can handle a few hours of This is actually the longest conversation I've had in a year.
Well, you can't resist because I'm fascinating.
And but people don't realize that I have to admit to myself that having a so-called real career with a 9 to 5 hours I've tried it. I cannot. I've talked to other autistics. They cannot do it. It's not that we don't want to. We want to pay our bills. We'd love to be independent, but I don't have a gift where I can create something people will pay $1 million a shot for it.
Yet.
Yeah, there you go.
Just because you haven't so far.
Right. But you're right. That is the definition of independence that we get wrapped up in. But I know that without my wife, I wouldn't have a home. I wouldn't have, I'd be renting something small and struggling on disability.
My wife, who is a special needs advocate, was actually asked to be on a panel who was interviewing Simon Baron-Cohen.
Oh, yes, yes.
And I can't remember if it was this panel or another panel which she was talking to him. He was talking about ways to get it to the point where autistics could have jobs and stuff like that. And she just looked at him and said, so what you're saying is our value to society is measured entirely on what us workers can do for you, queen bee. She can be very her. Yes, that is we tend to put, can you function well enough in society to support yourself? That's the measurement. Arn will likely never be able to do that, although he adores scooping melon balls. So I've been seriously thinking about seeing if we can get him some sort of work program where he can work scooping Italian ice. Nowadays, they have these fancy Italian ice parlors with 5,000 flavors, and he would be very good at that. Arn, we need some coconut. We need 2 scoops of coconut. He would do that. He could do that in a minute.
You mentioned you're even trying to work towards the idea that there'll be a group home.
I want a group home for Arn with perhaps 3 other kids that runs at a profit, so I can afford it, that we control so we can make sure the situation is good. I'm going to probably start with buying a house out at Fire. I don't know where you're from, come to think of it. Where are you?
Well, right now I'm in Texas, from California, and we've been in Minnesota and Pennsylvania.
Here's the interesting, this will show you why I know my mother is autistic. At one point, I called my mom on her cell phone. She said, well, I just finished my meeting in Midtown, and I was working in Midtown. So I asked her, really, where are you? And she said, in front of the elevators. And it's like, she didn't tell me which building. She didn't tell me what location. She said, well, okay, where were you before? I was in the meeting room. Could you tell me the address? What I'm looking at doing is buying a house out at Fire Island, which is a nice semi-isolated community near New York City where there are no cars. And buying a house there and fixing it up as a rentable a week at a time, which is mostly what they have houses out there for, made so that it is as safe as we can make it for non-neurotypical kids. The house is as safe from their possible deprivations as we could possibly make it. Because what we've noticed is trying to go away on vacation with Arn to someplace that he won't destroy and that he won't set a fire is a huge challenge. And especially for families where there are 2 neurotypical kids and 1 not. We want a place that all of them can enjoy. And we'll see how that goes. Then what I learned from that, I'll apply to the next project.
We joke that we will always be child-proofing our house, or as my wife says, we're always Scott-proofing things, because things just go wrong. And so there is that where I have to have certain things done safely. Obviously my daughters are a little more impulsive than I am, but I can understand you have to have a safe environment where things won't go wrong.
When we took Arn to Fire Island, I had to find the power box so I could turn off the pilot light on the stove, because otherwise he would turn the stove on and set something on fire.
Wow.
But there is a type of stove called an induction stove. that only heats the pans that are specially made. One of the things I'd have to do is make sure there's an induction stove.
Right. It's the flat, it's almost a glass ceramic top.
Yes.
Yeah, you can touch it and it won't burn you, but it'll cook.
Yes, unless a pan has been on it, in which case the pan has heated up the surface. But if you turn it on, first of all, it won't go on. If there's no pan on it, it turns itself back off.
So those are little things, but you do those to make it a safe environment.
Right. And we'll call in experts to go through the house, make sure everything's been caught, and just basically make it so that, fortunately we have Aaron to think of the things we would never otherwise think of.
And you can create this and make it a space that you rent out like an Airbnb kind of.
Well, there are whole agencies that rent out the houses people own at Fire Island. We had a house there when I was growing up. My mother sold it in 1986 for $30,000.
Oh.
I couldn't buy it back now for $1 million.
No. And it really, during the 90s, had quite the reputation as a party island.
It does. But it always did. But only 2 communities. There are like a dozen different little communities there. Ocean Bay Park, Cherry Grove, and Fire Island Pines are the party communities. The others are family communities.
I want to wrap up with a chance for you to say, kind of plug everything you do.
Right now, the only thing I'd like people to focus on is the Broadway Comedy Club on May 8th, 9 p.m. show. I will be one of the performers. I will be hilarious. I know, because I've heard I wrote my routine. I've heard my routine. It's very funny. And if you use the promo code Ordover, ORDO, V as in Victor, ER, you'll get $10 off. So if you will just pause and memorize that, or just play it back as many times as you have to write it down, I would very much appreciate it. And thank you.
Since you've done this, I really appreciate it, and we will be sure to put all of the information we can in the show notes. I appreciate everything. I hope we can,
We'll do it again. I don't know about you, but I have to go to the bathroom, so I'm going to go. Make sure I have to go to the bathroom stays in. Yeah, that's your line.
You have a great day.
You too. Thank you so much. Sincerely. Bye.